Our World Over Presidential Contender series continues. My next guest is currently running third in the latest Reuters poll of GOP candidates for the presidency. He has a reputation as a blunt, no-nonsense executive who tells it like it is, and he suffers no fools. In this wide-ranging interview, we talk about his record in New Jersey, his position on social issues, his faith, that Iranian nuke deal, as well as some of his competitors and that infamous hug with President Obama in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. Governor CHRIS CHRISTIE often invokes his mother, Sandra, in speeches.
One of the things my mother always used to say all the time to me was, Christopher, if you work hard enough, you can be anything. She spoke the truth, bluntly, directly, and without much varnish. I am her son.
So we thought his mother a good place to start the interview when we sat down exclusively with New Jersey Governor CHRIS CHRISTIE. Governor, you've said in the auto of life, your father was in the passenger seat and your mother was driving.
Yes.
What did she give you that you see now as you seek higher office and as you execute your office here as governor of New Jersey?
She gave me strength first. She gave me confidence, and she gave me faith. All those things.
Now you had a grandmother who would take you to daily mass.
Yeah.
How has that moment impacted the rest of your life, and how does your faith shape your daily decisions? I mean, things are coming at you all day long.
Well, you know, first that grandmother who I called Nanny, she had enormous faith, and she tried to make sure that she passed that on to her grandchildren. She felt like it was one of her jobs as your grandmother to do that. So we would walk to her church from her apartment. I would stay with her on the weekends often, and we would walk to church together. And she gave me one of the best advice, one of the best bits of advice about faith and how difficult faith can be. She had told me if you pray to God for things, God will answer your prayers. And so right. I don't even remember what I had prayed for, but whatever it was, it hadn't come through. And when I came back that next time to see her, I said to her, Nan, I'm not going to pray anymore. I said, because I asked God for something and I didn't get it. He didn't answer my prayer. And she goes, no, Christopher, God always answers your prayers. Sometimes the answer is no. And she said, you have to trust God that he's giving you the right answer. And so it informs so much of what I do, and now is so much a big part of our life with Mary Pat and I in raising our children. Yeah. And so it all started with Nanny.
Is there a favorite bit of scripture that sort of sticks out for you as you go about this office and as you seek the presidency?
It's on my desk. It's been on my desk since I became governor, and it's the passage from about Solomon, and he asks God to give him an understanding heart, to judge his people and to discern right from wrong. And it's sat on my desk, it still sits on my desk every day. Because I think in this job and any leadership position, you want to have an understanding heart. Yeah. And the biggest thing you have to decide in these jobs is what's right. And that's really guided me. In
your announcement speech, you mentioned unity being so important and that you were a unifying force here in New Jersey. You said the government in D.C., they don't even talk anymore. How would a President Christie change that dynamic?
I think two ways. The first way is that you have to be very clear about your beliefs, about your principles, so that people understand the direction you want to lead. And then the second part is personal relationships. You have to spend the time to get to know people, even the people you don't agree with. In fact, in some respects, even more importantly, to get to know the people you disagree with. I had an old boss who once told me, he came to visit me when I was U.S. Attorney, and he said to me, I asked him what he was doing after the meeting, and he said he was going to the New York Times editorial board. And I said, you're John Ashcroft's deputy, and you're going to the New York Times editorial board? I mean, do you have a death wish? And he looked at me and said, Chris, you don't understand. He said, I'm going to the New York Times editorial board because it's much harder to hate up close. And I think it's some of the most powerful advice I ever got about leadership, that if you bring people close to you, if they get to know you, if you get to know them, it's much harder to hate, and it's much easier to govern.
So you're going to start texting Nancy Pelosi?
As soon as I'm elected president. She'll be amongst my first text buddies.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Good.
Let's talk about this Iran deal for a moment. Would you have done a deal with this regime or attempted to do it? The government apparently already paid out $1 billion just to keep Iran at the table. Is that the proper way to proceed, given the history of that particular regime?
Well, Listen, Raymond, I'm old enough to remember 1979 vividly. I was 17 years old. I remember them taking our hostages. I remember them burning our flag. I remember them chanting "Death to America." And quite frankly, nothing has changed in the last 36 years, except the hostages aren't there because Ronald Reagan became president and had the kind of strength that they knew they couldn't mess around with. My concern now about this deal is, you wouldn't buy a car this way. I mean, if this is like going into a car dealer and saying, "I'm buying a car today no matter what."
Yeah, that's right.
You know what kind of price you're going to get, the highest price. And that's what this president and this Secretary of State have done. It makes no sense. And much more importantly, it's making the world a more dangerous and a more vulnerable place. And it's ill-serving the future of my children.
What do we do now, though? You've got ISIS on the advance. You've got these minorities, particularly Christian minorities, in the pinchers. What would President Christie do? You've got to do something about these people.
Sure, you have to. And what you need to do first is to bring together the allies that you have in the region who want to have the fight. The Jordanians, the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians. They want to have this fight. We need to be making sure we train them. We need to make sure we're motivating them and supporting them to be able to bring this fight to those folks. And we need to insist upon people being able to exercise their religious freedom around the world. We've stood for that for the entire history of this country.
Now, you are on record as saying you would like to see an increase in the military budget to even blowing those sequester caps. Some look at that and would go, isn't that fiscally irresponsible? The Congress put those in place to keep the rate of spending down. Why would you blow those caps?
Well, I would first make sure that people understand that I'm the same guy who's put forward entitlement reform that would save over $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. And so this would not blow a hole in any deficit. It's about reallocating what we're spending on. And I don't think there's anything that the government has a greater responsibility to do than to protect the American people and our lives, our freedoms, our security. And right now, with the military that we have and the track that it's on with this president, we're not going to be able to do that. Why do you think all these things are happening around the world? I mean, you see the Russians misbehaving. You see the mullahs in Iran misbehaving. Hezbollah, Hamas, all of the things that are happening around the world. We haven't even gotten to China. The fact is, they're operating in that way because they know America cannot project power and authority right now because this president has weakened our military.
I want to talk about your record here in New Jersey. You are often conceived of and portrayed in the popular imagination as an establishment guy. Your record, your pro-life record, is actually pretty sterling. Tell me about that, because you were regarded at one time as being pro-choice. What happened?
Well, first off, the way it changed for me was when my wife was pregnant with our second child. And we just happened to go to a visit to the obstetrician at 13 weeks. And I heard for the first time at 13 weeks our daughter's heartbeat. And as I was riding back to my job, I thought to myself, under my position on abortion, I said, that's not a life. And that's just wrong. It's wrong. I'm wrong. And it became clear to me that I had to change my position publicly as well, not just privately. And so that was the moment that changed it for me. And I'm the first pro-life person who's been elected governor of New Jersey since Roe versus Wade, been elected and reelected. We've vetoed Planned Parenthood funding out of the budget now 6 times in my 6 years as governor, and stood on the steps of the courthouse and spoke to pro-life rallies because I believe in it. And it's not something that came to me easily. It's something that was a profound moment for me. And life is a precious thing, and we need to protect it.
You also vetoed gay marriage legislation here in New Jersey.
I did.
Given the Supreme Court ruling, first of all, give me your thoughts on the reasoning of that ruling.
Well, it's funny, when I read 2 days in a row the Obamacare ruling by Chief Justice Roberts, and then Chief Justice Roberts' dissent in the same-sex marriage ruling, I kind of wish that the Chief Justice Roberts from the same-sex marriage had spoken to the Chief Justice Roberts on the Obamacare ruling. If they had just spoken to each other, we might have had consistent rulings. But unfortunately for me, the same-sex marriage ruling was a result in search of a rationale. And as a lawyer, I know that that's not the way courts are supposed to be ruling. And as a conservative, I don't believe that's the role that courts are supposed to be playing in our society. So I profoundly disagree with the court's reasoning and how it got to the result that it did.
What would you do as president? Anything about this marriage issue?
Well, listen, I think what we need to do is to be promoting marriage in our country. It's a really important thing for us to begin talking about again in that context. We need to be talking about how that's the way we build families, that's the way we strengthen our society, and I quite frankly think that we're not talking enough about that part of this.
Let's talk about religious rights for a moment. There's a lot of concern. There are some in the gay community that say, look, we need to make sure that we're not discriminated against now in the workplace. We want public accommodations, etc. You have said to government workers who might exercise their religious conscience, you took the job and you took the oath. No religious exceptions for them?
No, listen, what I mean by all of this is that we need to protect everybody's rights, everybody's freedoms, everybody's beliefs. And the fact is that for folks who are working a government job, you know, it depends on what role they're going to play, Raymond, but I believe in the end that the church and their beliefs and the beliefs of anybody, no matter what your faith, have to be protected under our Constitution, and the right to exercise those beliefs has to be protected as well.
Talk to me about Common Core. You were a very outspoken supporter of Common Core at one point. What happened?
It doesn't work.
That was it?
That was it. Listen, we tried it for 4 years, and it doesn't work.
The testing, the bar they're setting?
No, I don't think it's a testing.
Some people say it's just standards. They say it's only standards.
No, but it's more than that. The Obama administration has made it more than that. They broadened it out into really investing and infecting curriculum and the curriculum choices. And in the end, it didn't work because parents didn't believe in it and teachers didn't believe in it. Well, if parents and teachers don't believe in an educational approach, it is doomed for failure. And so I thought it was worth a try, given that it originally came from the nation's governors. But when it became infected by the federal government and the Federal Department of Education, folks at the local level became suspicious that this was a federal takeover of their educational system. They didn't think it made sense. They didn't like it. And I am not going to be an advocate for something that doesn't work. So we tried it. We gave it a good faith try, and now we're getting rid of it.
Let's talk about immigration. You have said we have to secure the border, but you're not a fan of building a wall from one end to the other. What do you do? How do you deal with this problem? And what do you do with the millions of people who are here and have been here for years, illegally or otherwise?
Well, first off, I think that the very best way for us to secure our border and to secure our country and to be fair to the people who are here, American citizens who are working every day, is to stop employers from being able to employ people here illegally and exploiting those folks. And that's what they're doing. They're often paying them low or no wage in some instances. And the fact is that every employer should be required to use E-Verify in this country, and every employer should face incredibly stiff fines that would wipe out plus their profit margin for hiring illegal people. That would allow us to stop the flow of people into the country, because if they knew they weren't going to get hired, and the only way to get hired was to go through the conventional route, then that's what they would be doing.
GOP presidential candidate Donald Trump has been making headlines for his comments on immigration, especially his suggestion that Mexico is sending the worst elements of its society to the U.S. This past week, he offered an idea.
So I had an idea. I think it's good. Every time Mexico really intelligently sends people over, we charge Mexico $100,000 for every person they send over.
What do you make of some of the comments by Donald Trump recently? He said he would charge Mexico for all the people here illegally. Like, do a head count and charge them.
Yeah, well, you know, this isn't people who are going to Mar-a-Lago and are going to not be able to leave until they pay their tab. You know, I don't think that's necessarily feasible. But the fact is that what we should be doing is to be working with Mexico to make sure that the rights of people on both sides of the border are respected, and that the border is secure for both countries. And we should be working together with Mexico on that, but I don't know that the chargeback idea is going to work necessarily.
Okay, but we'll check in at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what they do.
We'll see.
Jeb Bush is obviously the front runner in all of these polls. He's raised over $100 million so far. How do you compete with him? How do you beat him? What's the path?
The path is that you show the kind of leadership that you provided over time, give a vision for the type of leadership you're going to provide for the American people, and be a fighter for the American people. I mean, I think what the American people want more than anything else right now is someone who's going to go down to Washington, stand up hard and fast for the principles that we and the freedoms that we believe in, and is also going to be someone who knows how to get things done. And the fact is that everybody else in the race may have one of those. I think I'm the only one in the race that has both.
People keep pounding you over this Bridgegate thing. This is a local story. There have been 3 probes. You've been cleared in all of them. How do you stop that narrative?
You just continue to tell the truth. You know, I'm not going to ever run away from any question. And so I'm just going to continue to tell people the truth that, you know, when you're governor, there are certain things that happen on your watch that you must be accountable for. And I've been accountable by firing the people who were responsible for that. And now we need to move on to the real problems that are going on in this country and not to a traffic jam in New Jersey.
There's a new Reuters poll. You are number 3. You have moved up exponentially in this poll. At the same time, you look at some of your unfavorables, 50% unfavorables in some of the averages. How do you overcome that?
Well, you know, those are there because I've actually done something. You know, whenever you do something as a leader, there are going to be people who don't like you and don't like it. People are very resistant to change, and they're certainly resistant to making hard choices like we've made here in New Jersey to balance 6 budgets in a row and veto spending and veto tax increases. And so you're going to have that. I think the way you do it is campaigning. Campaigns matter. Campaigns matter. It's time to go out and talk to the American people about your vision for our future, for creating jobs for American citizens, for making sure that folks understand that America will continue to be the strong leader in the world, to stand up to this entitlement mess that's bankrupting our country. Go and talk about those things, and also let them see who you are and let them see my heart.
It's amazing when you talk to people and about CHRIS CHRISTIE. The 2 things that stand out, they mention Sandy and your efforts as a leader during that recovery. But the Obama hug, hugging the president, a lot of conservatives have a big problem with that. They say that it lost Romney the race. You would say what about that hug?
First of all, I would say it didn't lose Romney the race. But secondly, I didn't hug the president. I'll tell you the hug I did give that I remember is to a young girl named Ginger Doherty, who came up to me in Middletown, Port Monmouth section of Middletown, which is a middle-class section of that town. And she came up to me a few days after the storm, and she's the first person who made me cry after Sandy. She came up to me and she said, "Governor, I'm so scared because I lost my home." And I put my hands on her shoulder and I said to her, "You didn't lose your home. You can never lose your home. You just lost a house. Your home is where your mother and father are, and they're standing right behind you. They're right there, so you'll never be without a home as long as you have your mom and dad." And that little girl has remained friends of ours and her parents ever since that moment. That's just one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of hugs that I gave to victims throughout New Jersey in the weeks and months after Sandy. And still some that I still hug today who are still struggling to get their lives back to where they want them to be. So everybody wants to talk about a hug that didn't happen. I'd much rather talk about all the hundreds of not thousands of hugs that did happen, including that one to Ginger.
Final question. What's the thing you fear most, and what are you most excited about as you begin this journey toward the presidency?
Well, the thing I'm most excited about is the opportunity to make our country and the world a better place. I don't think there's any way you should ever run for president if you don't believe that you have both in your intellect, but most importantly in your soul, the ability to be able to make our country and the world a better place for our children and grandchildren. And I don't have a whole lot of fear coming into this race, Raymond, and here's why. I just absolutely believe I'm doing this for the right reasons. And you know, our 21-year-old son said to me, "Dad, don't worry about losing. Everybody who runs is going to lose except one person." And he said, "So just go out there and be yourself and do your best, and I think you're going to win." And so in the end, I don't fear much of anything. What I would have feared is not doing it, because I would fear that I would have lived with regret for the rest of my life that I didn't do my job as somebody who loves this country and has had the opportunity to serve, to try to bring that service to the highest level.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Thanks.